Welcome, viewers, to the latest edition of Casino Live Sports Betting Operator TV. My name's Peter White, and today we have Shaun McCamley, President of Euro Pacific Asia Consulting Limited, founder and CEO of GameWorks Social Games Provider, and Managing Director of AZ Consulting. Welcome, Shaun.
Thank you, Peter. Quite a mouthful.
It is indeed, yes. I would like to
Multiple
thank
hats. Yeah.
Indeed. I'd like to thank Simon Thomas and his team for allowing
Yeah.
us to take this interview at the
Yeah.
um, permission bar at the famous Hippodrome Casino. It's a wonderful place, and if anyone has any time in London, then it's well worth a visit. You've spent over 45 years operating at the highest levels of the global gaming industry. Looking back, what initially drew you into gaming, and what has kept you engaged throughout such a dynamic career?
Like most people in our industry, I don't really think any of us make a plan that we're going to become croupiers or dealers in gaming. Certainly, I fall into that basket. I'd actually just finished my doing 6 years. I was actually a musician in Her Majesty's Regimental Band or the Scots Guards. I was one of those guys who outside Buckingham Palace and trooping the colour. I did all those sort of exciting things. But really, the army wasn't for me, and so I actually purchased my discharge out of the army. And then, of course, I had nothing to do because I wasn't really a good enough musician to really sort of put it out there in the major orchestras. So look, I just looked in the Evening Standard. I was in between jobs, and I looked in the Evening Standard, and I saw a an advertisement for trainee croupiers with the Coral Casino Group. And at the time, Coral's Casinos had all they had four of the most high-end clubs in Mayfair: Curzon House, Palm Beach, International Sporting, and the other one was Crockford's, of course, which was one of their main casinos. But that was not the one that was now you see in Curzon Street. That one was further away on Pall Mall. So look, I applied. I was lucky. I got a job as a trainee croupier, and I was fortunate enough to be seconded to the Curzon House Club, which at the time was their flagship, was their flagship club. If you might remember, it's just down about 5 paces down from the Playboy Club on the corner of Hyde Park Corner. So what drew me in from there? Well, really, it was such a huge difference to what I'd been used to in my previous life as an army musician, coming into this really James Bond environment. And it truly was a James Bond environment, this beautiful building, working with these beautiful women, um, dealing to movie stars, dealing to some of the world's best musicians and most notable characters. Roald Dahl, for example, was one of our regular guests on day shift, and I used to deal blackjack to him all the time. So it was really such an interesting environment that I sort of warmed to it very, very quickly. And it was an industry which I thoroughly enjoyed. It gave me a wonderful grounding in my as a future career, which I've carried many, many things through in my career, my professionalism, and how we approach the industry as a whole. I got all of that really from when I very, very first started in that environment. It was quite amazing.
Excellent. I mean, your experience spans multiple jurisdictions across Europe and the Asia Pacific. How would you describe the most significant shifts you've witnessed in the region's gaming landscape over the past 2 decades?
It's really changed. Well, it's always been an evolving industry. We know that, and it continues to evolve today. I would have to say that for me, technology is likely one of the biggest aspects that the industry has really taken on board. Most of the technology that we see today was just not available in my time when I very, very first started in this industry, but it's gradually improved, and it's improved the industry. It's improved the way the industry can be managed. It's improved how people can be managed. But most importantly, it's been able to assist operators to properly cater and to recognize their best customers and also their future customers. And in this industry, it's all about developing your future customers for long-term returns, because it's a long-term, has a long ROI, the industry, in terms of what we want from the players that we are developing. And we do develop players, and that's a key point. And without good technology, that's always been quite hit and miss. But now it's quite dynamic, with smart tables now, the way that the calculations can be done properly for player ratings. So technology for me is really the key thing I've seen over the years.
Um, Having worked across both established and emerging markets, what distinguishes successful operators in Asia from those that struggle to gain traction?
The key point, Peter, is knowing your market and knowing your player base. You've visited Asia many, many times. Of
Yeah.
course, you come from a European background. You've seen firsthand how different the market is between a European player base and the Asian player base. And when operators come in from non-Asian jurisdictions and they try and bring the same set of rules, management practices, understanding or non-understanding of what they're coming into, they are just doomed to fail. And they do. And they fail quite quickly, and they lose substantial amounts of money on their shareholders' behalf. So the operators who are successful, and Macau is a very, very good example. When the large American companies first came into Macau, they did bring that initial, well, this is just an extension of Las Vegas. That was the initial mindset. But luckily, they listened. The senior management listened to the senior managers that they employed, mostly from Australia at the time, because Australian management teams all had exposure, a long time exposure with the Asian markets. And so most of the senior guys were from Australia. And luckily, the senior people from the United States mostly listened to what that the advice they were being given about, this is not Las Vegas, this is China, this is Macau, it's
Right.
completely different. And that's you've seen the results ongoing of Macau, and that's because they listened and they took everything on board.
During your time at Ho Tram Casino, you oversaw a remarkable turnaround from a substantial monthly burn rate to a positive EBITDA. What were the key decisions that drove this transformation?
When I arrived at Hotram, the monthly burn was around 5 million a month, significant in anybody's terms. And there are a number of reasons for that, that I identified and that needed to be identified quickly. The management team was very fractured. The property itself was relatively unknown. It was a confusing branding. It was called the Grand, but no one ever knew it as the Grand because everyone relates to it as Hotram. You've just said yourself,
Yes, I
Hotram.
did.
Everyone
I
goes there,
did, yes.
but all the branding is done in the Grand. It's called the Grand. So one of the first things I did was I changed, readjusted the branding, and we called I renamed everything and I rebranded everything to Hotram Resort and Casino, which is what it is. It's not a hotel, of course not. It's a huge integrated resort complex. Um, so it's a little bit like calling one of the hotels in the Venetian, it's the Four Seasons. Of course, that's just a hotel. But what you're looking at an integrated resort product. That was really emphasized to me when I first arrived in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh. And I was asked, some people asked me what I was doing there, and I said, "Oh, I'm taking over as the new president of Hotram," thinking they'd know exactly where that was. None of them, and we're only talking a major city 2 hours drive away, didn't even know who Hotram was. So immediately there's a red flag that something needed to be done to bring that property's presence and
Mm.
understanding up into the market. And the way that we did that was to bring world-class entertainment to the property itself, to bring significant sporting events to the golf course, because we had there is a wonderful Greg Norman designed golf course there called the Bluffs. already voted then as one of the top 100 golf courses in the world. So we had the tools. We just needed to make sure that we could use those tools effectively, and at the same time raise the presence of the property in the global arena. And so the first thing that we did, we brought in the Asian Poker Tour. First time we'd ever been to Vietnam. That attracted over 220 foreign players in its very first outing. It was so successful that the World Poker Tour contacted me and said that they also wanted now to do an event because they're always looking for new venues. And they heard the success that the Asian Poker Tour had had, and so they were booked to come in the following year. That was really good news for the property. We then looked at, well, what can we do with the golf course? So we reached out to the Asian PGA to see if they would be interested that to a PGA event. We would host it, but they would, they would put the tour together. They were very excited to do that because they'd never been into Vietnam. They were always looking at Vietnam, but they weren't quite sure the direction that they should take. And we had some of the world's top players there. Um, we had five past Open champions who were in the field. And with the broadcasting rights that we were able to negotiate, Ho Tran was beamed out to 40 different countries around the world when that tournament
Well,
was running. We built a big baccarat event around that, so of course we wanted to recover our costs, which we did, of course, in the first evening. So it was these sorts of events, and then finally um, we had a wonderful property for entertainment. We didn't at that time there was no showroom, but we had plenty of room to do something outside, and so we managed to entice Above and Beyond, one of the world's biggest bands, to come and perform at, at the property, at the resort. At the time, and we're going back now 15 years, right? But at the time, those guys could fill Madison, they could sell Madison Square Gardens in 20 minutes in ticket sales. So a world-class event, um, and it was something that we promoted very heavily. So we put, that was part of the process, was to put the property on the map so that people looked at Ho Tram as an entertainment venue, sporting venue. Oh yes, it's got a nice casino as well, and it does have a nice casino. It always has. It's been incredibly well put together. And so when you combined all those things, I also brought in a new management team on the casino because the management team that we had there were really not on the same page. And you have to have your people have to be on the same page as you are if you're going to be successful. It's all very well having your vision and having your concepts and ideas, but you need strong support and help from your management team to be able to make that happen. And we did. And we turned, within 12 months, we turned that 5 million burn actually around to a small EBITDA, each month.
well,
So these sort of things do work, but you have to put you have to put your best foot forward and hope that you get support. I was fortunate; I did get support from the board, and I got support from my team that were working with us.
when entering a property in need of change, how do you assess where to begin? People, product, or process? You've actually just answered one of those key points there with the people. But and you and you've kind of given insight into everything else. But if you'd like anything else to add on that,
No, I look, people for me are the number, yeah, they're the key element
yeah.
in a successful enterprise. So yes, I do look at the people. I look at how they work together. Of course, it's good to have experience, of course, to have that. But your people, you need to be working with people that support your vision and support your goals. Because if you don't have that support and help, you go, you just can't really achieve those goals that you want to do. So for me, it's always been people, and to make sure that we look after our people as well. Of course, that's always the primary concern.
So can you tell us about your current projects, with particular regards to GameWorks? What's all that about?
25 years ago, I moved into the digital world of online casinos. I was one of the very first C-level executives to move across into digital at the time. It was a great experience. Um, I'd have to say, really quite amazing. People ask me all the time what it was like all those years ago. I'm sure you can remember dial-up. I certainly can remember how difficult it was working with
Yes.
dial-up. But the industry was full of these really, really innovative guys just wanting to make this industry perform, build the industry, make it work. Anyway, you get caught up in all of that. It's quite amazing. But all of the online casinos, still today, they have play for free sections. And so I was asked to write a white paper on social gaming, and I sort of had a little bit of a closed mind because play for free never really worked. You're either a casino, you're either a free player or you're not. They don't convert from one to the other. But when I started looking at the data and when I started doing the research, I couldn't believe how much money was being made. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Social makes as much money or more than an online casino makes in the same space. And so I thought to myself that there was a lot of opportunity there. It was something that I really wanted to get into. And so I approached some like-minded colleagues of mine and said, look, I think we should get into the social world. We don't need to be licensed. It's not considered gambling. It's a very soft space. And, it's very, very popular. The platforms are very sticky. They look great. It's just about entertainment. There's no gambling involved at all. In fact, the games aren't the most important part. It's the social interaction. It's the gamification tools, things like leaderboards, mission statements. You have to make missions to get through various things, multiple tier levels to get through. So it's all about entertainment. And so I didn't want to be an operator. I'd had enough of being in operations. I wanted to be a software provider. I wanted to go into the B2B side of the business. And so I managed to recruit some very, very talented um, coders to work with us. And we built a completely independent social gaming ecosystem, which comprises of the front end, what you look at when you log in, the rewards page, which you need to give away prizes or whatever sort of loyalty things you're going to give away, and a strong set of back office tools, which we could use as what we call a self-hosted solution for our clients. So in other words, not white labeling, but a social ecosystem where once it's been built, once it's been branded to the client's requirements, everything is handed off and they host everything on their own servers. We are just a software as a license, as a service provider. That's really all we do. And that's what we've done with GameWorks. And today, we are the only provider of that type of ecosystem in the industry. Nobody else is doing what we're doing. And so we have a really good opportunity to bring something that's really quite unique in this part of the world and in Europe. In America, it's been very, very successful for at least the last 15 to 16 years. All the big players are in social, MGM, Caesars, Hard Rock, Rush Street. They all have very, very successful social gaming platforms, which they link to their online casino platforms. And they do incredibly well. And that's what GameWorks is. We provide a social gaming ecosystem which is self-hosted on our client servers, in a nutshell.
Excellent. So, I mean, you're going out to the big operators out in Asia then and explaining to them that this is an important addition that they can have.
Yes, we are. Unfortunately, the operators, not just in Southeast Asia, but across Europe, are very new to this industry. And they still don't have any confidence and they still don't have any real understanding in what their digital business should look like. And what we see all the time, and particularly in Southeast Asia, we see a lot of the operators here farm out, they give away their digital business to a third party provider, a white label, if you like. And
Yeah.
I can understand why they do that because it gets them up and running quite quickly. Usually the head guys are under a lot of pressure from the owners or from the shareholders to get something up because The shareholders and owners all know that they need a digital business, particularly in the Philippines, for example, to be competitive, because the land-based casinos are now, as you know, are really struggling. And of course, they know that they need a digital footprint. They need something in the digital space, but they just don't set up their departments correctly. They either give it to casino operations to manage. That's wrong, because the guys just look at it as an extension of the casino floor, which it shouldn't be. Or they give it to IT. Well, IT are great at fixing. Their IT's job is to fix problems. Technically, the job is not to build a business in the online digital
Right.
space. Or they give it to casino marketing, and for casino marketing, it just becomes a brand. It's how do I extend the brand? So they don't look at it as an independent vertical that can generate significant revenues. And that's really what they should be doing. And that's the message that we've been trying to put out into the marketplace. As you know, the articles that I've written for Casino Life, we've mentioned that a few times in
Yeah.
articles. The last article that I put up on LinkedIn, that had over 5,000 impressions in
Yes.
2 weeks.
I know.
So, so I think you told me the same. I think you said that even your numbers were, for that. So
Yes.
what I'm saying
That's
is,
why you're writing for us, Sean.
no,
Because of that.
I enjoy it. But the point is,
Yeah.
I think, Peter, is that it just clearly shows that there's an appetite to try and understand what should be done in the digital space in the online world, at least throughout Southeast Asia and in Europe. Um, but they just don't put it into practice, which is going to be a real problem for them if they don't, really sort of take a different approach.
Many jurisdictions in Asia are reconsidering their approach to gaming regulation. Which markets do you believe hold the most promise over the next 5 to 10 years? I mean, it's Indonesia, because Philippines looked like it was going to really take off post-COVID, but the government's kind of created a few
Yeah,
challenges.
look, look, 15 years ago, I would have said Australia, because if you remember, about 15 years ago, Australia was very, very keen to become like the hub of online gaming. But then the government took a complete 360 and made it completely illegal. And I think that's a little bit what I'm seeing in the Philippines. As you know, it looked full of promise, but now the government are putting so many roadblocks in the way of the operators that it's going to be very, very difficult, for the operators to generate any significant revenues, even more so if they're using a white label. So it's very difficult. So unfortunately, I'd have to say that Philippines, I'd have to pull back a little bit from there. I don't really think that, well, I don't really see anything happening in Indonesia. It's far too, the religious stuff there is just far too strong.
Right.
And it's a shame because it's a huge population. Um, but it's never really going to happen. Of course, Vietnam is gradually opening up. As you know, Ho Tran was just recently given approval to take on locals. But there again, the way the structures are set up in Vietnam in terms of the government structures, it's still very much a communist-run country. You don't see it when you visit the country, but when you're there, when you're working in the environment, and when you're working closely with the government departments, it really comes. You realize that you're in a communist environment, and it's very difficult.
What about South Korea?
South
Because the
Korea,
American Sun have got a major
yes,
resort.
they have. But when we're talking about jurisdictions, um, really the most important thing in any jurisdiction is to have a gaming commission. You really need to have a gaming commission in place. And most of these South Asian countries, they work from decrees, or they don't have an established gaming commission that we are used to working with in the West, for example. They tend to work out of they use different methodologies. But as an operator, you need to have one government department that you can go and work with, and go and talk to, and sit down and relate to them. I just came back from Sri Lanka, again, there was a lot of talk about Sri Lanka, moving forward with its jurisdictions, and it's true they have formulated and they have passed regulations in December specifically for casinos and for online casinos. But that's all they've done. They have not even put together their structures. They have not put together their gaming inspectorates. They have not put together the departments that really need to be they need to be in charge, that need to work with the operators. The operators told me that not one of the government um, departments that put all this legislation together even talk to the operators. They just blank them completely. So that's not good when it happens. As a government, you really need, and when we do feasibility work and when we do any work, with government departments throughout the world, the first thing we try and encourage the group, the department that's been nominated in charge or the minister that's been put in charge, we'd like to sit down with them and just say, look, you really need to speak to the operators to get an understanding. It's a two-way street. It's not all government, and then people would do that. So it's a difficult one to answer, Peter. I think again, we've got the UAE. What's going on there? Things are happening, but until we see governments really establish correctly their own internal structures and in their own departments to specifically have an independent gaming commission to work with the government and work with the operators, it's very, very difficult to do that. Of course, the UAE has done that. They do have a totally independent uh, department to manage the licenses and processes. But there are always complications, of course.
So is there any particular country or region that you think might have some scope for, potential over the next 5, 10 years? Does there one stand out, or it's all a bit of a mixture of
I think for me, it's all a
marina-based?
bit of
Singapore still seems to
yeah.
be doing
Well, of
well.
course, well, no, of course, Singapore, that's a given, so we
Yeah,
just take it for granted that everything is done there correctly, which it is. Look, outside of Singapore, outside of Macau, which are the two main, regions,
yeah.
within Southeast Asia. When we're looking at other markets, I would like to think that perhaps the Philippines will get back on track. If it gets back on track, then I think there's some good stuff that can happen there. But it needs to get back on track, and until that happens, it's very difficult. Really, I would not be advising if I was wearing my consulting hat. I would not be advising clients to consider for now the Philippines under its current changes which are coming up.
I mean, as you touched on earlier with regards to GameWorks, technology is reshaping the player experience from data analytics to AI-driven personalization. What innovations do you believe will have the greatest impact on the industry in the coming months and years? Because I know things track in about 6 months. It's all churn rates amazing and developments.
I'd have to say AI. I know it's a catchword and we're all used to it, but my goodness, don't we all use it every day already?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but AI has. I don't use Google. I don't use Google anymore. I use AI for everything in terms of my data research and everything else. Google's gone by the wayside for me. I mean, who would have thought that, a couple of years ago? AI for the gaming industry, both land-based and digital, has got so much promise already with the aspects and the help those that technology can bring to the industry. As you just said, every day people are looking at new ways to use that technology to improve um, all aspects of both land-based and online gaming. And I don't think, well, we haven't seen the best yet. That's for me, that's the exciting thing. We've still got the best is yet to come. And with these tools, really, really the industry is just going to go forward again in leaps and bounds. We're going to go from that time 25 years ago when we had dial-up and we could only work with CD-ROMs. You remember we had to put the CD-ROMs in if you wanted to
Yeah.
get anything.
Yeah.
And then within 5 years, 8 years, we had we had ASDL. You know, we didn't have high speed, but of course, you know, we had something which was just fantastic at the time
Yeah.
when you compared it to dial-up. So we are going to see a lot of things happening in that space, absolutely for sure.
I mean, ESG and responsible gaming are increasingly central to operator strategies. How do you see these priorities evolving in the Asia market?
They're evolving already. I mean, look, you know, responsible gaming, you know, is really paramount in all the operators' strategic planning. It has to be. Perhaps a number of years ago it wasn't considered to be so important, but that's because really the governments were not really sort of too strong on what was to be applied. But in today's market and in today's world, you really must be on top of your responsible gaming. You must be on top of your KYC policies, and you must be on top of your AML structures and your procedures in place, both online and land-based. No question, you cannot get past this, and you must apply to it. I've always been a big supporter, and again, my articles reflect
Yes.
how important operators must pay attention to their responsible gaming requirements. I have a client in Bulgaria, for example. Bulgaria is always being considered a bit of a third world, but I guess it is in terms of Europe. But the clients that I work with, they have foundations, and they're casino operators, you know, in Bulgaria, probably the second or third biggest in the country. But the two owners, the two main shareholders, they've built foundations around responsible gaming, and these sorts of structures that you have in place, even in countries, you know, such as Bulgaria, are very important. And it's great to see this type of, you know, responsibility that's taken place. And the governments, of course, appreciate that because, particularly in a country like that where, you know, there's not a lot of money to go around, you know, for these type of programs, when you get responsible owners which are willing to invest in things like responsible gaming and to make sure that all their policies are correct, everything is black and white, it's important. And I think that it will continue to be so.
Yeah, Bulgaria has come along a long way in the last 20 years, in particular in technology and the online side of things. I totally agree with that. Across your career, is there a particular project or achievement that you consider most defining?
Well, I was always proud of what we did at Hotram, but I have to go back to my time when I opened. I was part of the pre-opening team for Burswood Resort Casino in Perth, Western Australia, which is now Crown Perth. We we were not very experienced as a management team. Most of us had only been at pit boss level, or perhaps, you know, maybe a gaming shift manager level, and we were thrown into this huge deep well, you know, to recruit and train over 1,000 staff in a 6 month period, and open one of the biggest casinos in the world. And I was very fortunate. I was given the responsibility to open the property's international room, which was the venue for all their VIP, high-end junket play, and it was a huge learning curve for all of us, not just on the cultural side of things and how to deal with these types of players, but also on the various programs which we had to use in terms of the commission programs. You know about the rolling programs, which are now everyday, you know, part of life in Southeast Asia. But at the time, they were very, very foreign to us, and as Westerners, we just didn't have any understanding what these were and how they were supposed to work, how the betting limits were supposed to work on something what we call, as you probably know, the differential betting, as opposed to what we call a box limit. These were all new things to us. So I look back on those days with a lot of pride, and the fact that, you know, we did actually learn this industry from a Southeast Asian perspective, and we turned that property into a multi-billion-dollar revenue producing property within 4 years. And it was one of the most successful um,
Yes.
casinos in Australasia at the time. This was before Crown was even evolved. You know, this was just the only other competitor was on the Gold Coast, but they didn't have access to the same sort of players that we had access to in the West,
Yeah.
given our location so close to Asia.
And finally, if you were launching a new integrated resort today, what would be the one principle you would promise prioritize above all else?
I'd make sure that we have a good entertainment um, structure in place. In today's industry, it's not all about casinos. The casino, of course, we know is the revenue engine. We know that, but it's not the it's not it shouldn't be considered as the main star when it comes to other aspects of a particular resort. So for me, I look at the bigger picture when I'm looking at a project and a resort. It's not just about gambling, it's about the entertainment, it's about the other aspects. It's how you work with the local community. What can you do? What community driven projects can you bring to that community who all look at you with a lot of distrust anyway, because they all know about gambling, they're not happy about gambling. And so I look at all aspects. I look at that much, much bigger picture. And I make sure that, if you heard me say before, I make sure that I put a team in place that is on the same page as that they understand it's not just about the casino, it's about all the other aspects that we have to work with. And when we're doing a design project, we look at these things. We look at, well, what size entertainment facility have the architects put in place? Is it big enough?
And I guess the beverage, the food, the restaurants, if you get a star chef, things like
Exactly.
that, and the spa, so it's health and
Exactly. Health and
well-being.
wellness. Health and
Yeah.
wellness is very, very important. And you know how important it is in Southeast Asia if you're putting a project together there. And in fact, in any part of the world now, health and wellness is incredibly important. So we look at all these aspects, when we're putting together a plan and we're talking with potential investors who, unfortunately, they just seem to focus on the gaming side, obviously, because they all feel it's the golden goose. It's not the golden goose. We know that. We know that. Just because you have a casino license doesn't mean to say that you're going to be successful. In fact, far from it. There's a lot of more aspects that go into that. And we've seen over the years many, many failures because of that mindset. They've just focused on what the casino does. So in today's world, no. Today's player, they're not interested. Most of them aren't even interested. Up to 80 to 90% of visitors to an integrated resort don't even go inside the casino. They don't even visit the casino. They go there to visit the restaurants, as you said. They go there to visit all the other aspects that these wonderful properties offer.
Yeah,
They go
the
for the
beaches, the
experience.
swimming pools, and
They go for the
yeah,
experience. They go there to gaze, to
yeah,
wonder at some of the architectural. I mean, look at MBS, for goodness sake, one of the world's most iconic buildings that
yes.
that are there.
Swimming pool's
Um,
pretty awesome.
so yeah, so they go there for the experience, and so in today's world, you have to recognize that fact that you have to build something and offer something which is a total package.
Excellent. Well, look, with that, Shaun, I'd like to thank you for your time. It's been excellent to hear all about your amazing life, and look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll see you in Macau in a couple of weeks.
Indeed. Cheers.
Okay, take care. Thanks again, Peter.